If the prices of groceries, gadgets, and, everyday items stopped going up or even went down, well, that sounds like a win for your wallet, right?
I mean, on paper, yeah, it sounds like absolute relief. But falling prices are actually a symptom of a really dangerous economic trap.
Right, and that's the mission for this deep dive. We're taking a close look at the hidden dangers of deflation.
Exactly.
Huh.
We'll be exploring how Japan actually escaped a decades-long deflationary spiral recently, and why China is struggling with this exact same trap right now.
Yeah, even with a booming export sector.
Yeah.
So we're pulling from a stack of economic analyses today, looking at the reflation nations to see how inflation and deflation play out on the ground for you and me.
So before we look at China or Japan, we really need to establish why economists are just so terrified falling prices.
Yeah, because it's not just, cheap stuff.
No, not at all. It's this self-reinforcing downward spiral of low growth.
Mm-hmm.
So think of a cycle where property values drop.
Right.
And that shrinks household wealth and consumer confidence. If you feel poor, you defer purchases because, well, you expect things to be even cheaper tomorrow.
It's like the economy just doesn't want to move anymore. I mean, in that environment, hoarding cash and just not spending actually becomes the most rational, logical choice a person can make.
Precisely. And because people aren't spending, businesses make less profit. So what do? They stop investing.
They stop hiring.
Exactly. And wages stagnate or even shrink.
Yeah.
And there's another huge problem with deflation. It makes actual debt burdens much heavier.
Wait, really? How does that work?
Well, if your wages shrink, but your mortgage or car loan stays the exact same size, it's suddenly much harder for you to pay back that loan.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the math on your life gets really dangerous.
It does. It's a very sticky trap. And for decades, Japan was the ultimate cautionary tale for this.
Right, after their asset bubble burst in the 1990s.
Yeah, exactly. But recently, this massive role reversal happened. In 2022, China's inflation rate actually fell below Japan's.
Wait, so Japan was finally running hotter than China?
Yeah, and this was confirmed by the bond markets late last year. The yields on 10-year Chinese government bonds dropped below Japan's for the first time in over 20 years.
That is wild. I mean, investors basically bet that China was facing a deeper deflationary future than Japan.
That's exactly what it signaled. But it raises the question, how did Japan finally escape?
Yeah, you don't just snap out of a 30-year mindset overnight.
No, you don't. Our sources point to three main factors. First, there were these massive external shocks.
Like the pandemic and the supply chains.
Right. COVID-19, the war in Ukraine, and a really weak yen. These all strained supply chains and pushed global energy and raw material prices up.
So it was imported inflation. They pushed prices so high they just couldn't be ignored.
Right, but imported inflation alone just makes people poor. So the second factor was crucial, wage negotiations.
Okay, so the workers pushed back.
They did. In 2023, Rengo, that's Japan's leading trade union federation, they demanded a 3% rise in base pay.
Wow, 3% in Japan, that's huge.
It was their highest demand in 28 years. And it worked. It created this vital link where rising costs actually translated into rising wages.
So families could actually afford the higher prices. But didn't the central bank try to kill the inflation? Usually they raise interest rates when that happens?
Well, that's the third factor, policy support. Instead of fighting it, the Japanese government actively supported the inflation.
Really? How?
With tax breaks, subsidies, and cash handouts. They wanted to ensure a complete exit from deflation.
So Japan didn't just fix things with one magic policy. It was actually a series of massive global shocks that jump-started the engine, and then the workers and government kept their foot on the gas.
That is a great way to put it, yes.
Okay, so let's look at China today, right? Because on paper, China is experiencing some of the exact same price shocks Japan did.
Yeah, they also suffered a massive property bust with developer defaults and halted construction.
Right. And recently, they've seen a big spike in prices due to the war in the Gulf, which pushed up energy.
And don't forget the global AI boom.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
Because of the rush to build AI data centers and power grids, China is exporting a lot of, unsexy but necessary kit.
Like industrial pumps and heavy-duty server fans. Right. Electrical machinery.
Exactly. Exports of goods could grow by 10% this year. And this actually pushed producer price inflation positive in March 2024, hitting 2.8% in April.
Okay, so on paper, that sounds great. But it feels like a kitchen where someone turned the stove on max, but put a really thick pot on the burner. The very bottom of the pot is getting red hot, but the food inside just isn't cooking at all.
That's a perfect analogy. Economists call this an illusion of narrow reflation.
Narrow reflation. Okay, what does that actually mean?
It means the price increases are confined strictly to upstream inputs, things like energy, petrochemicals, copper.
Like the stuff at the bottom of the pot.
Exactly. Meanwhile, downstream, consumer goods, services, construction prices, they are still facing severe downward pressure.
So the everyday things people actually buy are still getting cheaper.
Right. So the obvious question is, if China's export machine is booming with AI and energy goods, why isn't that wealth trickling down to the average consumer like it did in Japan?
Yeah, normally an export boom means factories hiring millions of people and wages going up.
Well, the industries benefiting from this AI and energy supercycle are highly capital intensive.
Meaning they require machines and equipment, not people.
Right. You need advanced robotics and factories, but you don't need to hire massive amounts of new workers.
Ah, so a strong export machine no longer equals a strong jobs machine.
Exactly. And the data completely proves this disconnect. In April, retail sales rose by a measly 0.2%.
Wow, 0.2% is practically nothing.
Right. And crude oil processing actually fell by 5.8%. Overall, industrial production slowed down too.
So people aren't spending, and traditional industries are struggling. But wait, why don't the Chinese workers just demand higher wages like the Japanese workers did?
Well, unlike Japanese workers in 2023, Chinese workers currently lack the bargaining power to demand higher wages.
Because of the high youth unemployment.
Yes. Structural oversupply in the labor market. If you demand a raise to cover petrol prices, there are 10 people waiting to take your job for less money.
Oh, man, that is rough.
It is. And this is exactly why consumer confidence is so incredibly low. If you have weak employment and stagnant wages, households simply will not spend money.
Right, no matter how much copper or how many server fans the country is exporting.
Exactly. They're stuck in that deflationary mindset.
So if the workers can't force a wage price loop, the only entity left to step in is the government, right?
You'd think so. But China's policymakers are taking a very, very different approach than Japan's did.
Really? Our sources say they're acting super cautious.
Incredibly cautious. While Japan handed out subsidies to make sure inflation stuck around, Chinese officials are reluctant to even cut interest rates.
Wait, cutting interest rates is like economics 101 when no one is spending. Why wouldn't they do that?
Because they worry about squeezing the profitability of the banks.
Ah, because of all the bad property debt sitting on the bank's balance sheets.
Exactly. The banks need wide profit margins to absorb those developer defaults.
But isn't that incredibly risky? I mean, by holding back to protect the banks, aren't they letting the deflationary mindset take deeper root in the minds of everyday people?
They absolutely are. But they are also wary of fiscal stimulus-like spending government money because of rising public debt and the hangover from past stimulus excesses.
Right. They don't want to build a bunch of ghost cities again.
Exactly. So ultimately, policymakers are treating these wartime price jumps in energy and exports as an excuse to do less.
Wow. Rather than using them to fuel a broader, durable recovery.
Exactly. They are missing the window.
So what's the main takeaway for you listening to this?
Well, not all price increases mean an economy is recovering.
That's the golden rule here.
Yeah. As we've seen from comparing Japan and China, a country only truly escapes deflation when wages, employment, consumer spending, and corporate confidence all heat up together. You can't just heat the bottom of the pot. Right. And it leaves us with a pretty provocative final thought. For decades, countries relied on massive manufacturing exports and infrastructure booms to create jobs, right?
Yeah, to pull themselves out of economic slumps, put money in people's pockets.
Exactly. But if the industries of the future, like AI and green energy, are primarily run by machines and capital rather than human labor, what entirely new tools will governments have to invent to save their economies the next time a crisis hits?
Man, if factories don't need human hands, how do we get money into human pockets? That's definitely something to mull over. Keep digging deeper.